All right, Chief. Welcome to the weekly scrap number 34. Very excited to have you on. I don't know, you've been making videos on your Facebook page for quite some time, and one of the ones you made a couple of years ago was the first time I saw you, and it really resonated with me, and it's one of the reasons the scrap exists. And so it's pretty inspiring. I wanted to tell you that, and then we'll talk about that a little more later. But go ahead, for everybody, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for that, and congratulations on a successful podcast. You're doing fantastic. And, my name is Jason Hoevelmann. I am the fire chief at the Florissant Valley Fire Protection District, and we're in North St. Louis County. So St. Louis County surrounds St. Louis City, and we're on the north side of the city up there. Been a career firefighter for a little over 24 years. Been in the volunteer fire service. Not as active as I used to be since I moved, but started in 1985 as a junior volunteer. So this is all I've ever done. Yeah.
Nice.
And then I like to teach and things like that, but that's,
Wow. You said 85?
Yeah, as a junior. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That is now I want to follow up because one of the things you preach and teach is humility. And so I'm going to add on to your introduction. I hope you don't mind, because you are the definition of leave it better than you found it, with two books written specifically on firefighter leadership that I know about. When I was doing research to interview you, I found like 40 articles on Fire Rescue 1 alone. Of course, the videos I mentioned earlier from your Facebook page, FDIC, and then here recently, starting last year, I believe, your online company officer courses and the battalion chief development courses and the strategy guides, which my guys, I think they went to your first online company officer development course, a group of lieutenants and captains from my department. So,
oh, no kidding.
I think they were in your inaugural
wow
class. So anyway, that's what I wanted to tack on to the introduction.
Well, thank you.
So I'll lead off with your video that I mentioned earlier from 2018, Promote People, Not Processes.
Yes.
So that struck a chord with me. I mean, that was such, especially the latter half of it where you talk about we have to get subjective and start looking at people's character and who they are as people. Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe in that 100%. And people take this the wrong way. And I get two extremes from that comment, but I believe in it. And my department and my union leadership and our staff have believed in that. And I will preface it by saying that, every organization is different, but if you take it just for what it is and you only test people to a civil service exam or a third party written test, and then you go do whatever other part of the process that you do, and you strictly provide decisions based only on points, you're leaving a lot on the table. And I've seen fire chiefs promote based on that process and totally discouraged by who they promoted. Yeah. So to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's the same with hiring. We talk a lot in the fire service about culture, and we can define that in a lot of different ways, and people have different opinions of what it is, but it exists. It's there, and every department has its own, and quite honestly, every crew has its own, and every company. I mean, you can go on down the line. Yes. Because it's based on beliefs and personalities and a lot of other things. But there should be an overreaching culture for your organization and department that hopefully overrides a lot of those personal things when it comes right down to the important things. And if you don't at least consider who you're hiring and promoting in some of those regards, you're setting yourself up to have big problems, in my opinion, because people matter, and the way that they do things and the way that they think and their attitudes and their behaviors, those things matter. And we talk about it and see it all the time.
Yeah, I could not agree. Like I said, that was my first interaction with you, was that video. And then of course I devoured everything else since then and before then. And No Exceptions Leadership. It's a small book. It is it's what I call a firefighter friendly book. And it was our first book that I made battalion chief last year, so my captains and my
congratulations.
lieutenants,
Good for you.
we all got a copy of the book. We all read it, then we got together and we discussed it. And so I chose the book because of the guys who aren't readers. It's not an intimidating. It's very friendly. Like I said, you can pick it up, thumb through it, go anywhere. And so that was the first book we chose to do as a group together to learn from. So,
well, thank you. Yeah, that book was interesting. A little backstory on that book. I had taken a lot of those antidotes and had them compiled for a long time. And that particular year, I got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so I was sitting at home recovering from surgery. And that's when I put that book together to kind of keep myself from going stir crazy. Yeah. And it was made that way on purpose. And some of the reviews on it were negative because of the way it is, but it was purposely written that way for exactly the reason you talk about. It was meant to be something to flip through and not read from cover to cover. And I actually got the idea of that kind of format from a book called Up the Organization by a guy named Robert Townsend, who was back in the 60s and early 70s, a high-profile CEO. He took over Hertz rental car system and turned that company around, and had a very anti-CEO attitude.
Okay.
When it came to certain things, and that's kind of where it came from. It's a really good book too. If you can find them pretty cheap on Amazon.
What was the name of that?
Up the Organization.
Up the Organization by Townsend. I'm going to write it down real quick.
Robert Townsend. Yeah.
Townsend.
And
sorry, I got to take my notes.
It a little bit. Yeah, he did it like he alphabetized his book. So if it was about promotions, it was under chapter P. Okay. And if it was about salaries, it was under S. And so that's how he put his book together.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
No, that is. Everything's good on the prostate cancer then.
Yes? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Just follow up. I want to make sure I didn't,
Yeah.
I'm moving on from that. Online classes. You started I think last year was your start of the officer development program and the battalion chief development program? Or have they been going on longer?
The company officer class has been going on maybe 4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay.
And then the battalion chief development class, which is kind of the administrative side, it was probably 3 years ago.
Okay.
And then the battalion chief development, operational development class was about 1.5 years ago, I think, year ago.
Now, have they always been online, or were they in person at first, or?
So they all were created from classes I do in person. Okay. And I just kind of condensed them down into a tolerable online version that doesn't get too the battalion chief ones, there's more writing. I've had some people tell me it's like taking a college class, but there's no due dates. There's no real grades. I get people that don't take it because their chiefs won't let them because it's not associated with a degree program or an official pro board or anything. But I'm not willing to jump through those hoops. That's not what the intent of those classes are.
Right.
And if people want to take them and gather something out of them, fantastic. If they're wanting to build a serious portfolio for certificates and all those things, it's probably just not the class that you're looking for.
Now, I know our guys, all of them, to a man, had good things to say about it, said it provoked a lot of thought on stuff they hadn't even thought about as company officers, and especially on the training side of things, where they were, I know a lot of them were talking about. That's what I was bringing up, was that the online courses got ahead of the curve on the COVID-19 almost. It's like, because now everything seems to be jumping to, of course, with social distancing and the inability to get together with more than 10 people, almost everything has been pushed online.
Right. Yeah. And I can't take full credit for that. There's a guy that I work with and who's part of Engine House Training, Frank Lipsky, who several years ago started toying with online classes, and he and I, interestingly enough, when we put together our first training division at Florissant several years ago, he and I were two of the big creators of content and finding a system inside of our organization that would be met with as least resistance as possible and that was economical. And so he and I started putting together some classes, and as we put it together, we had people asking us how we did it, and we taught some classes on how to basically build a training program and division for free inside your fire department. And so then he kind of started a modern fire instructor course, which goes straight into apps and a lot of technology. He calls me brick and mortar,
okay,
because I'm not quite to his level yet, and he makes fun of me, but I'm okay with that. I still use pen and paper, and so out of that, he said, "Hey, you really need to do your company officer stuff online. Hey, I think there's a market for it." And I'm like, I don't know. So I threw it out there, and it's been well received since. It's been updated 2 or 3 times in the time that I've started it. And so then I decided, well, I'll give the BC thing a shot. And then I had people asking for the operational side of the BC thing. I did a first do tactics class last year. I didn't really like how it went. I'm not sure I'll do any more of those, but It's hard to do. I don't know. I just may need to refine it a little bit. It's hard to do assignments. It's hard to do validation things that are useful. And so I probably need to revisit that. But I do have one that's in the works right now that with the COVID has slowed me down. It's for a new fire chief or new executive chief. So like beyond battalion chief stuff.
Okay. So even moving up. And that's something I wanted to ask you, because I saw as I was doing my research, you have promoted up to, are you the big dog now?
I am. I'm the fire chief. I started January of 19. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been doing it for a year and a half now almost.
Yeah.
How was that transition?
At times difficult. It happened. To say I was groomed would be probably, partially inaccurate, but to say, we're a fairly small department and my chief was very open with information. So I knew sometime down the road, it was a possibility that I'd have that opportunity. I thought that I'd have 3 or 5 more years to worry about it.
Right.
But he was at a point in his career and he left on really good terms and everybody loved him. And I would have been perfectly happy working the rest of my career for him as a battalion chief. But good for him because he's getting to enjoy retirement. He's doing wonderful and enjoying his time off. So I wasn't really ready for it in the sense that I saw it coming.
Right.
So, and it's a switch. I talk about it in my BC class, excuse me, that the first time that the engine quint was what it is. But the House 1 truck came back from a call and I backed them in as a battalion chief, and I backed them in, and they get off the truck and they're all laughing and whatever they're talking about. And I realized at that point that things were different, and that part of your career, I don't want to say it's over, but you're not in the cab of that truck anymore, no matter if you're going to the store, or if you're going to training or running a call. And when you go down the hall at my place to the fire chief's office, it's the same kind of transition that the challenges obviously are that it's more administrative.
Right.
But I don't run as many calls because we have battalion chiefs and people to handle those things. And you don't want to, it's a fine line of overstepping your authority and taking that away from them.
Sure.
My chief didn't do it to me, and I don't feel compelled to do it to them. And they don't have fires when I'm there during the day. So it fixes that problem. But and going to a more strategic position, I think, is probably the biggest. You're truly strategic, not only operationally, but from an organizational standpoint.
Right. Totally new set of challenges from that regard.
Oh yeah. Because you're doing things that you're learning it all new, right? I mean, you can take all the classes in the world and have kind of an idea. It's kind of like this pandemic, right? You can take all the incident management classes you want, but when it happens, it's different.
Right.
It's different. And at least you have an idea what the terminology is. But when you're talking about trying to plan bond issues and how long that's going to stretch out and what capital improvements have priority over others, and the collective bargaining agreement that's coming up due at the end of this year, which I got a great shop, so that'd probably be fairly easy. But when you do those things, you have to look beyond this year and even next year. You have to look, how do those things look in 5 years,
right,
with the budget and the possibilities, like right now with the economic downturn, how does that impact 2021, 2022? And we're looking at a possible tax increase in 2024. Well, how does all this stuff change that, if it does at all? What's the temperament going to be if there's still not a complete economic recovery at that time? And so you look at those kinds of things in more data driven information. And so you learn it while you go and you ask for help.
No doubt about it. Just to pick your brain, because I don't get to talk to the head chief that often, but every level of promotion, there seems to be a little more distance in the ability to build relationships. It's not difficult. It takes more effort. Does that make sense? And is that any different when you get to the 5 bugles?
Yes. No doubt about it. And, I remember before I moved into the office talking with some friends of mine about, hey, I might jump on the ambulance every now and again with the guys, or I might do this. That doesn't happen. Right. You just don't. It just doesn't happen. It's just not available to you most of the time, because you're constantly, the dynamics just don't work out. But what I have done is, and what our shop has done is, when we hire somebody, I get a few hours with them a couple times during their orientation week. I usually take them to lunch and sit down and go over expectations and what our organization's about, and ask them do you have a wife? Things you don't ask in an interview.
Right.
And we get to do that. We're a small enough department that our house one is attached to the administration building. Every morning, just about, I go down and at least have a cup of coffee with everybody.
That's awesome.
Or we'll eat breakfast with them. I haven't gotten around to it, but I'm trying to make every shift in every house and buying them lunch. I've gotten 3 out of the 9 done.
Okay.
But it's hard. It is more difficult, and it doesn't matter how popular or how friendly you were with people before then. Rumors still circulate.
Oh yeah.
And you try to stop them out when you can.
Try to get ahead of them. People will make up their own narrative no matter what.
You got to have thick skin. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, went down a rabbit hole there on the chief thing, but I want to ask you the most surprising thing you found doing the online courses, as far as the difficulties of, like you said, assigning the assignments, or what the challenges you haven't overcome that's different than teaching like in person.
Yeah, the feedback, providing feedback, and to be honest, most of the feedback I give is generic in nature, unless it's something. You'd be shocked that. I can have 32 people from 32 different parts of the country, and their answers are almost the same. Oh, really? Everybody's thinking the same thing. Everybody's got the same basic problems and challenges. It's really uncanny how similar everybody's responses are. You have a few outliers here and there.
Sure.
You have some people that give a 5 sentence answer to something that somebody else gives a 2-page answer to, and you can kind of see who has real attention to detail and who's just kind of going through it and probably just listening to the content, and
right.
And that's okay. And some people go through it and don't turn in anything.
Oh wow.
Which is fine. They just want to sit and watch the videos, and it doesn't matter to me. But probably the most challenging thing is the feedback part of it.
Gotcha. So I want to talk about what amazes me in the modern fire service is, generally speaking, the lack of prep. And I know there's exceptions to these rules, but the lack of prep that we give our officers. If you're lucky, you have a mentor that teaches you. You know what I'm saying? And if you're unlucky, then you're just thrown to the wolves. Here's your badge. Go figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And I know that that's specifically one of your missions in life, is to change that. But
yes, it is, and we're still. We're still working on it at my department. I've got a training officer who's a captain who has just put together a phenomenal driver program. He put together and updated our company officer program, and we're currently kind of got put on hold with this COVID stuff, but we're wanting to start changing. So really, where company officer development comes from is your acting captain process, right? It's if you put up it's really about prerequisites, and qualifications, so to speak, before you get there. So if you can put the right qualifications and the right program in place for a person that wants to be an acting captain, then you've got some of that infrastructure, so to speak, in place for those people. And then you're just talking about interpersonal communication and how they deal with people after that point.
Sure.
Very few of our problems in that realm are operational. A handful, and we will pull acting captains off their position. We'll take them out of that. It happened just recently that if somebody's not meeting that criteria and those expectations and all that stuff that we talk about for acting captain, and it's harder once they're promoted, but beforehand, we'll yank them out of there.
Nice. So is the process then you have a set of basically a checkbox of expectations or? Yeah,
kind of. So it's based on, so to be an acting captain a lot of it is contractual with the union. Okay. So we have to play within those guidelines.
Sure.
And it doesn't really tie our hands, but sometimes, for example, taking somebody out of that position has to come along with a conversation and process with the union to ensure that we're not disenfranchising, that we've got, information that backs up what we're doing. The same thing goes for the implementation of that. So you have to be on the department X number of years. You have to be in a certain tier, right? In our system, we have different tiers because we run transport ALS.
Okay.
So if you're in the bottom tier in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, I think it's 10 years. You got to be 10 years before you be acting captain. So if you're in the bottom 9 and you've been in the bottom 9 for 10 years, you're still not going to be an acting captain. You got to get out of that tier. All right. You got to have some experience in the truck. So, and then we've got some established skill sets that they've got to be proficient at. They got to show, they got a little workbook to fill out that they have to work on with their station captain in regards to reports and documentation and, kind of the management side of it,
day to day.
And then they have to do so many hours riding the seat with their captain behind them. And then if they're not quite there or they're not comfortable, we just extend it. And some people get there, some people don't.
Right on.
And, then at the end, you have to do a evaluation scenarios and some other inbox stuff with your battalion chiefs and the training division. And so by then, you have a pretty good idea who's solid and who's not. And it's interesting to watch people that 5 years in, you wouldn't think they're ever going to get there. Then they mature, they age a little bit. That 10-year mark is really valuable, I think. I think it's it allows a 22-year-old to be 32.
Right. Yeah.
And people laugh at me, but that's a big difference in maturity.
There's no doubt.
How people think and how their behaviors and attitudes are towards things in life in general. It gets them a little bit out of this, 10 years on the ambulance. They've kind of accepted things that a 5-year medic hasn't. And for us, that 10-year mark has been a really big deal for us.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, it is. So after all the prerequisites are met, you can kind of get a gauge of who's meeting muster and who's not. What's the actual process for becoming captain? Is it a competitive?
So captain, we hire a ergometrics is the first process of that. So long as they're an eligible acting captain, they can test for captain. And then the first process is ergometrics test. So it's a video-based written test.
Okay.
And it's also a psychological exam at the same time. It's really pass or fail.
Okay.
We don't put a lot of stock into the test scores until we have to. So let's say we got 2 candidates that are neck and neck at the very end, and we're having a tough time deciding. We'll go to test scores.
Okay.
And see what those look like. But as long as you pass, you move on. And we really don't look at those scores again until later. The only caveat to that is if there's a critical failure somewhere in some of that, we'll look at that. But by and large, it's pass or fail, and they move on to a neighboring department has a blue card lab.
Okay.
We don't do a blue card test, but we do. That department comes over and takes pictures of our buildings and sets up simulations.
Oh, wow.
And then they go in and do the simulations. And it's all routine stuff. There's no planes in the nursing homes. Or,
right.
I don't even think we have true multiple alarm fires in those. They're literally what they run 90% of
the bread and butter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's based on our first alarm SOG is what they're tested on. And then after that, they go to interviews. And the interview panel, we changed it up a little bit this year. The fire chief is not involved. I observe, but I'm not involved. The battalion chiefs and another captain, and I don't remember, but we kind of shook up who interviews them, and then the battalion chiefs pick them. And,
oh, wow.
Then I take that to the board, and they're done. It's in.
Nice.
So
Very nice.
Myself and the shop steward, we do an interview with them, but it's more of a formality. It really doesn't go to their the decision at all.
The selection,
it's just kind of a thing to say that, you know, I'll look at the notes from the interviews, and the shop steward and I will kind of ask questions, follow-up questions on some of their answers.
Nice.
But then it's the BCs pick them.
Wow. And that I can only imagine that's pretty good responsibility, that once that's on their shoulders, they take it pretty seriously. I can only imagine.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I hate promotions.
Oh yeah,
I hated to. I would much rather give a guy a couple days off than promote, because guy getting a couple days off obviously screwed up. It's usually not a lot of gray area there. They violated something, and it is what it is, and we're going to get through and done. But
right,
you have 5 people going for captain, and you got to pick one. You're telling 4 they're not good enough.
Right.
And I hate that.
Right.
It's never happened.
No, yeah. So yeah, officer preparation, promotional process. Switching gears on you, I'm going to talk about the long-term effect of this pandemic. Jason Hoevelmann, Chief, what do you think your predictions are for how this is going to affect the fire service?
I think long term, you would hope that we're more prepared for whatever comes again. I've got 2 guys right now. So when this thing got started, I got put in charge of North County. I got put in charge of 15 fire departments for the St. Louis counties, and so we set up a command structure in North County. Well, we did the same thing inside our own department. And so I've got 2 people in charge of logistics, and they're the only people right now. I went and I raised the limits on both their credit cards. They don't have to get permission. They know what we need for PPE, and they were allowed to. They had free reign. They just buy it. And now, since we've kind of gotten caught up with that, you know, I've told them that we need to have. I want a minimum of 30 days of supply in these 7 or 8 things, and you know, however you go about getting them, just keep us informed.
Sure.
And I think that's the key. And I remember after 9/11, getting our department. Every department in St. Louis County got a black bag, and it had a level B suit in it, and it had the cartridge click in for the Scott Air masks, and it had all these different Scott cartridges, and it had booties and all these gloves, and it had the radiation sticks, and it was full of stuff, and everybody had their own. When they expired, we didn't replace them. Nobody did. They're all gone. You can't hardly find a department in St. Louis County that has them anymore. And I think that's the resistance, right? And so then people talk about the economics of that. And I would argue that the economics are even better to, over a 10 or however long period of time, maybe it's months, to buy this PPE at true market value, as opposed to what we're paying for it now. You're going to come out ahead. Even if you have to rotate it out every 2 or 3 years, you're going to save money doing it that way, and you're going to have less stress. You're going to have less opportunity for exposures and contraction of different viruses or whatever we're dealing with. And I think to me, that's the big lesson, is that it's going to happen again. It might happen in the fall. I truly think that if it happens in the fall, I think we're ready. I think it's going to be so close to this one that anything in the next 2 years, my guess is we're going to be okay from a fire department standpoint. I think the big challenge is for the municipal fire departments that are going to lose members unless Congress increases the funding for those SAFER grants and AFG grants to keep people from being furloughed and fired, and just reduction in engine houses.
Right.
That, to me, that's the biggest risk. I think you start taking these people off the streets, reducing your service level and your capabilities, and then this does come back again next spring in a big kind of way. Not only are you not able to serve your community, but you're going to be even more stressed and stretched to the limit because of the economic impact this has had on those municipalities.
No doubt about it. No. Yeah. Chris Tobin, in fact, I think he's St. Louis Fire Department. I don't know if you know him or not, but
yeah, I know Chris.
He came on. He was talking about the reason Stockton is the economic downturn. The reason they fight fire every day is because of the economic downturn, and so his deal was there's going to be return of the war years if the economy tanks as bad as if it doesn't recover. Well, we'll see what happens. But except that the difference will be it'll be lightweight construction, the stuff built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that's going to be burning, as opposed to stuff from the turn of the century on forward. But anyway, it was an interesting take. I wanted to run that by you, see what you thought.
Yeah. I don't know that we'll get to the Warriors kind of thing, but I do like St. Louis City, and Chris will tell you this, there's portions of their fire in their portions of their city that used to be hotbeds, and now they're just vacant. They're vacant lots because they did burn them and they've been torn down, and not a lot of redevelopment in North City. But they do. St. Louis City, you'd be surprised how many recent developments that they've had in and around the Interstate 40 and 44 corridor, close to the stadium, that are lightweight. They're lightweight apartment complexes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've been instructing over 25 years, and I want to ask you your secret to staying as engaged as you have been over that span of time, and your advice to others on keeping their intensity up.
I think willingness to be wrong. I think you've got to be able to, you've got to look past your own thoughts and beliefs and listen to other people. I think, and I think you've got to be engaged, and that doesn't mean, some people take that I remember getting made fun of at work in early in my career, before our place was a different place, for taking vacation and going to FDIC or going to a conference or taking a class and doing all those things. I remember guys making fun and making the comment that, well, you know what they say, those who do, and those who don't teach,
Right.
And they don't know who Ray McCormick is, and they don't know who all those Mike Champo and John, they don't know who any of those people are.
Right.
That are some of the more experienced officers and firefighters in the country, John Mittendorf and Bill Guston. They don't know who those people
Right.
are. So, but the one thing I will say that I've learned from Bill Guston in particular is that you have to be willing to put in the time to really learn and be intimate with the job. And I learned that as a captain, and I'll tell a quick story where I was embarrassed.
Okay.
Bill had come to our department to do a class, and Bill's been a good friend of mine for a long time. And I've been fortunate enough that he's taken me under his wing and been very influential, both from a personal level and professional level. And he came to our department to teach a class when I was a training officer as a captain on a Quint. And he came to our engine house, and it escapes me now exactly what he asked me, but he asked me something about my truck, and I didn't know the answer. And I was incredibly embarrassed.
Oh, yeah.
But instead of being, and Bill was gracious and didn't, but instead of being withdrawn or mad, you learn from those types of events and conversations that none of us know as much as we think we do.
Right on.
And most of us have probably said in a class that we go, oh, why haven't I known that? I've been in the fire service 25 years and I never knew that. And having the willingness to admit that, I went to Andy Frederick's training days years ago, and I'm sitting in the state. If you've ever been there, it's this big, it's almost like a Roman Coliseum looking kind of place. The floor's real sunk in the ground, steep seats, and probably the worst presentation I've ever given in my life. my biggest regret as an instructor was bombing it there. But anyway.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm sitting in this auditorium with 2 other people from Florissant, and I'm looking across, and I see this guy with glasses, and he's in the 3rd row. He's real close. He's talking to all the instructors at breaks, and during class, he's writing at a furious pace for every instructor. People I've heard of, people I haven't heard of. It's Bill Guston.
Wow. The
guy's 35 years on the job at that time or something, you know, and he's the keynote closing the whole conference out. And there he is. And so those were lessons that I've learned throughout my career, along with people who you'll never know and who have never taught outside of their own department, is that you have to stay engaged, and you never know enough. You never know enough. Even the things you think you know, there's another piece to that puzzle. Wow. That you haven't heard of or you've forgotten. And I think that's the key. And I think the other part is being an instructor. My instructor tip is that when you teach and you present to, whether it's a small department and there's 10 people in there, or you're in front of a room of a few hundred, the most important thing that you can do is share things that you struggled with or failed at. And tell them how it happened and why it happened and how not to do that.
Wow.
The more vulnerable and the more relatable that you can be to your students, they're going to take away more from that than you up there talking about all your successes.
Wow. Okay. So just the connection off your failures, being willing and able to share them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We all screw up.
Yeah, no doubt. I always ask the guest if they have a book they would like to suggest that firefighters should read, and you are no exception. So I want to hear, and I got to take my notes. So go ahead.
Yeah, so there's several, and I'm happy to send you a list from last year.
Awesome.
But there's one in particular, and it's not what you would think it would be. But I read it, really not knowing what the book was about.
Okay.
Last year I read 2 books like that, but this one in particular, in my mind, every officer and firefighter should read, and it's really about empathy. If you get down a story, it's called When Breath Becomes Air, and it's about a neurosurgeon who, through this story, becomes the patient.
Oh, wow.
It's a true life story. Becomes a patient. He ends up dying before the book's finished, and his wife finishes out some of the book. But from cancer, he dies from cancer. And you know, the one thing that us in the fire service that I think that we can do a better job of, me included, is having empathy, not only for the people that we serve, but the people we work with, right? The people that do struggle in the firehouse, the people that do come in, this Generation Z, okay, that's coming in, that have never had to have a saw. They've never had a chainsaw in their house. They've never had to change the oil in their car. They've probably never jump started a battery because they got AAA. They've never changed a tire. You know, being empathetic to those folks sets them up on the right foot to, instead of scorning them and telling them how stupid they are, understanding that in that regard, we need to that's part of teaching. It's
That's
just
awesome.
It didn't have to get taught to us because we had a different skill set coming out of childhood, but this new generation doesn't. And that's just an example of where I found that book to be very poignant, and it just really struck a chord with me. It's not a leadership book. It's not a military book or anything like that, but I think there was a lot of value in it. And I found it to be humbling in some respects.
When Breath Becomes Air.
When Breath Becomes Air. The guy's name was Dr. Paul Kalanithi, and it's a good book. It says it's a memoir about his life and illness, battling stage 4 metastatic lung cancer after dealing with patients with like brain and neuro problems. Very talented, smart person. But to me, what I got out of that was, empathy.
Wow.
You know, being.
This is what's crazy, Chief, is every time I do a scrap, I ask the guest who's someone I respect, and they say, well, this book, and this is why, and you got to read and my stack of books that I have to read is just, I'm falling so far behind. So, but now I've got another one to put on the pile.
Yeah, and I listened to it. I did it in an Audible book, and it was really good.
Okay. I'm going to have to try that. I'm a big physical highlighter, taking notes person, and so I have trouble with the list. I listen to podcasts, but almost more for entertainment value than I do because I forget so much if I don't write notes.
I'm with you on that.
5 questions for firefighters. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, so here we go. These are 5 questions. I've updated them a little bit, but as it is, we're just going to keep going and keep collecting the answers. So, What is the number one issue facing the modern fire service?
I got to be honest with you. I think it is where and who firefighters are getting their information from on social media. I got to tell you, I see the instant information, I guess, maybe more accurate, is that, in my opinion, we've seen a renaissance in hands-on fundamental training that is, I think, foundationally swinging our fire service skills back to the positive from 20 years ago. But I do have a big concern with people that are putting a lot of information out there. There's got to be a vetting process for firefighters, and not just jump on these bandwagons when it comes to certain things and ideas, and making sure that they're validating that information. And it's kind of struck a chord with me for the last 3 or 4 years. But I think, I could say training and all those things, but I really believe that those tools are available. It's picking through the trash to get to those good tools, right? And a young firefighter is very influential, and I think that they've got to be careful.
Absolutely. So, instant information, instant unvalidated information.
I think so.
There you go. Number 2, what is the thing you are most excited about for the future of firefighting?
The younger folks. I really am. And I can only say this based on my experiences at our own department, but can they be a little arrogant? Can they be a little overbearing? Yeah. But I found that when you give them a purpose and why they're doing it, and sometimes you get into their ass a little bit,
right.
But they're really smart. They're really smart. They are really inquisitive. They really want to know why they're doing what they're doing. They're not asking it just to be rude or obstinate.
Right.
They're real inquisitive, and they pick up on things really quick. They are eager. My ambulances get to run fires, right? And these are the newest employees on our department. And you give them the tools, and you give them the reasons, and you tell them how important it is. And we have to get onto them for not racing each other to the fires, right?
Right.
And so, to me, that's exciting and encouraging.
That's awesome. And your empathy is showing. So, just so you know, Chief.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Number 3, best rank position to be in the fire service.
Company officer, without a doubt. The most influence in the department, and has the biggest impact in my mind on any department, whether it's lieutenant or captain. Definitely company officer.
That's my answer. So you're the first one who said company officer. I've only been doing these for the last 4 scraps, but and everybody has different reasons for their answers. So no one has to defend them. But that is my answer. You're at that level where you can still have a tight relationship with your crew, and I think it has the biggest impact on the culture of a department.
You've got the most influence in the entire organization at that level. You'd have a hard time telling me otherwise. I've been in that position. I've seen the good ones, the great ones that I've got now, and what they do and what they get accomplished, and the impact that they have on their members, both good and bad.
Yes. It goes both ways. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Good answer. I like that one. 5 out of 5 on that answer, just so you know.
All right.
Best advice you have ever received?
I think the best advice I ever received was don't take yourself too seriously. I know it's cliche, but I really think that when you put it in perspective and in context of what they mean, and what they mean by that is, you know, you have to be, you're not going to fix anything in your career or your department if you don't believe there's anything wrong. So if you're taking yourself too seriously, in my experience, others start taking you less so. And then any influence that you have had in that setting, whether it's at the company level, the battalion, or your entire organization, you lose that. No matter how accurate your information is, and no matter how right you are, when you start putting yourself ahead of everything else, and take your, and you're thin-skinned, and you get mad easy, right, and it's all about you, and all those things, you lose the opportunity to truly impact the people that want to be led and impacted. And so it all ranks. So from private on up is just don't take yourself too serious. Take the job serious. Take your position serious. But from an individualistic standpoint, take care of yourself. But don't take yourself too serious.
Nice. Okay. Final question. And I might have to change this one in the future but we'll see what your answer is, and we'll keep tabulating the answers. But it's heavy fire and tenable space. Would you rather be assigned to the nozzle or first in on VES?
Taking the nozzle.
Okay.
Taking the nozzle.
Definitely want the nozzle.
Good. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to make that VES person's job easier.
Okay. I was going to say, most people have taken the VES. You're the first guy who jumped on the nozzle.
Because I'm going to take the whole problem away.
I like it.
They're going to be able to walk into the room and gaze down the hallway because the fire is going to be out so fast.
They're not going to have to worry about the isolate.
Not at all.
All right. I like it. I like the answers. Thank you for doing the 5 questions for firefighters, Chief. Best place to contact you to book a class, order a book?
Yeah, my first initial, jhoevelmann@gmail.com, or you can go to Facebook, The New Fire Officer, and direct message me there. If you Google, I'm pretty easy to find.
Fair enough.
But if and if you just got a question, I'm happy to take. I'm happy to help. I've had tons of people help me in my career, and they still do, and I'm obligated to do the same.
That's awesome. Anything you want to? Any classes you got? I mean, I know with the COVID-19 going on right now, everything's canceled. But is anything going on for you right now you want to talk about?
No, not really. I'm working on a 3rd book.
Oh, nice.
There's like you said, I've had a lot of speaking engagements canceled and postponed. So right now, as far as getting out, but I will say this: I'm working on. Through the New Fire Officer Facebook page, I am working on a raffle that will hopefully bring me to a department or area in the next 12 months or so. We haven't got all the details lined up, for free. And it's in the spirit of this COVID thing and people that are going to be impacted economically. And there's a sponsor who reached out and talked to me about being a part of it. Details aren't worked out, but there would be 2 winners that would be able to set a date in the next 12 months. And the only thing that has to be picked up is my travel, and that's where the sponsor is looking to
That's
pick
awesome.
Up that.
No, I actually saw that post. I'm like, man, I wonder if I can do this for my department or if that's being greedy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's going to be some kind of, we haven't decided how we're going to pick. And I think I'm going to let the sponsor do the vetting of those so that there's no bias on my end. And it wouldn't be purposeful bias, but
right.
To try to make it as fair as possible. And so I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to that opportunity to get out there. You can't do it for free all the time. You just can't.
Oh, you'd be stretched so thin, you'd never have time to do anything.
My wife wouldn't be happy at all.
No, I was going to say, so when you do finalize that and I see the post, I'll share it everywhere I can and get the word out. Cool. So that'll be awesome. Thank you so much for being the guest number 34 on the Weekly Scrap, Chief. I know you got stuff to go do this evening, but I appreciate your time and letting me pick your brain and answering all these questions. Next week, you got me solo doing some fire nuggets, firefighter quotes, and then the week after that, Mike Gagliano is going to be on the scrap, so everybody come back for that. This week, Chief Jason Hoevelmann, the new fire officer, no exceptions leadership. Thank you, sir, for coming on and being the guest.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. For everybody out there, I hope the tone stays silent unless it is burning, and we will see you next time. Stay safe out there. Thank you, Chief.
You bet. Hey, thanks so much. That was fun.
And we